Hello everyone and welcome to the EDH squad. Today we're going ahead and looking at one of my EDH commander decks. It is a blue-red wizard deck. As you can see, we have two legendary creatures here. We have Niv-Mizzet the Firemind and Nin the Pain Artist. I have both of these guys because I pretty much just interchange them as who is the general, as in a game-to-game basis. Sometimes I feel like Niv-Mizzet, sometimes I feel like Nin. It kind of just depends on the game and the day. There's nothing in here that combos out with either of them. You know, they're just good, solid creatures, good draw engines. There's no infinite combos with Niv-Mizzet or anything like that. So we'll go ahead and get to the deck. Start off with the lands. First land we have, of course, Reliquary Tower. This lands in pretty much every EDH deck, especially every blue deck. So having no maximum hand size is the thing you want to have. Next off we have Lonely Sandbar. This card, it just cycles for a blue mana. And then we have Homeward Path. This is a good utility land. Helps you get back any creatures that your opponent steals from you. You can also use it for a little diplomacy when opponents are stealing each other's creatures. You know, you can help one guy out. Maybe he'll help you out later on down the line. Then we got some land destruction. We got a Wasteland and a Strip Mine. And then we have Forgotten Cave. Go with the Lonely Sandbar, cycling lands. We got a couple dual lands. We got Steam Vents. We got Sulphur Falls. We got Izzet Boiler Works. And we got a couple lands in Rupture Spire and Command Tower. It's out for any color. Then we got some basics. We got 15 islands. And we got 12 mountains. And that rounds off the lands. Let me get into some artifacts for the deck. We got Sol Ring, EDH staple. We got Mind's Eye, let you draw a ton of cards, another EDH staple. We got Lightning Greaves, and we got Swiftfoot Boots. These cards, just giving your guys some protection, letting you use some tap abilities right away, more so than giving your guys a lot of haste for attacking. Get into a couple enchantments in the deck. We got Rhystic Study. It's a blue staple for a lot of EDH decks. Your opponents might get a little irritated with it, and you might get a little irritated having to ask every time someone plays a spell if they're going to pay one or not. But you just can't deny the raw draw power of this card, so it's got to be in. And then we have Leyline of Anticipation, another good enchantment. You don't have to have this in your opening hand and cheat it into play with its ability for it to be good. You know, as long as you're getting it down early, it's going to work out for you. This deck relies a lot on instants and wants to play, you know, on your opponent's turns. So getting the benefit of dropping your permanents, playing your sorceries, your creatures, enchantments, artifacts, and whatnot on your opponent's turn at, you know, the end of their last turn, right before you go, is going to be very helpful. Then we get into the counterspell package. This deck has a lot of counterspells. It's basically all counterspells and wizards. So we have actual counterspell, and then we have Deprive, and we have Dissipate and Fairy Trickery, and we have Hinder to deal with those troublesome generals, and Spell Crumble, the updated version of it. Then we have Forbid. This is probably the best counterspell in the deck. You're going to be drawing so many cards and your hand's going to be full all the time, so discarding 2, it's going to be very easy for you to have what will seem to your opponents like infinite counterspells for the rest of the game. This is what's going to help you in the late game just win the table. We have Dismiss, counterspell with a cantrip. We have Mindbreak Trap, exile any number of target spells. This one's in there just as just in case, random things like Obliterate and whatnot, or in the rare case anyone's playing Storm decks, this will help you out. We have Cryptic Command, an all-around good multi-purpose counterspell. Counter target spell, return target permanent to its hand, tap all creatures your opponents control, or draw a card. A lot of times it's going to be counterspell, draw a card, or counterspell, bounce a permanent, but to tap all your opponent's creatures is going to be very relevant in the late game when you're trying to win with a lot of weenie guys. We got Desertion, another good counterspell. A little pricey, but the effect is very swingy. Counters any spell, but if it's an artifact or creature, you get to put it in play under your control. So it's going to be good in the late game with all the fat bombs. And lastly, we have Time Stop. It's just a good catch-all. It's gonna save your life as a fog sometimes. It's gonna, screw your opponents over from fighting each other and getting good abilities. It just has a lot of purposes. Then we have a couple other instances. These spells, sometimes they act like counter spells, other times they're just, copying what's the best thing going on. There's a lot of swingy spells in EDH played, so you might as well get some too. We have Reverberate, Reiterate, which you can buy back, and Wild Ricochet. And then we have Blue Sun and Red Sun Zenith. These cards are in there because you're going to play long games if you're staying in the game with this deck. They're going to go really long. A lot of times you're going to almost deck out. So you'd like to have a way to keep putting stuff back in your deck so you don't deck out. Sometimes you're going to have to Blue Sun Zenith for 0 just to stick around. And Red Sun Zenith in the late game is going to be really good. Just fireballing your opponent for 15 plus and then just doing it again and doing it again because it's the only card left in your deck. Insurrection, another good card for the late game. The creatures, as you'll see later in this deck, are generally small, lots of 2/2s and 1/1s. So when it comes time to get the game over and your opponents are amassing huge board stalls with a bunch of crazy big creatures like most EDH games happen, play this, you're going to have counterspell backup, and you just win. We have Reigns of Power. This one's a little similar to Insurrection, only it has the ability also to kind of be a defensive card. Sometimes you're getting ganged up on because people don't like counter spells, and it's understandable. But sometimes you can use this as a fog when your opponent attacks, just switch guys and fog that attack. Or sometimes you can make player A's creatures, they're attacking you, and you swap with player B and you just trade off all each other's guys, and kind of like a pseudo Wrath. So this card's got a lot of staying power. Then we have Time Reversal. This is another card in here just to try to make sure you're not decking out. Lets you shuffle in all your graveyard and everything and draw a new hand. This card could be Time Spiral if I had one, but it serves just as good a purpose. Then we're going to get on to the creatures. First off, you'll see I have Vedalken Aether Mage. So obviously, like I said earlier, I'm playing a wizard deck. Not really worried about bouncing a sliver back to anyone's hand. Although, every once in a blue moon it might be relevant. But you can pay 3, cycle this guy for 2 to up any wizard in your deck. Then we got Willbender. This guy is one of the few morphs in the deck. If people know what it is, they might try to play around with it, but if not, this guy can be a big blowout. Flip him up, you can change the target of a spell or ability. You can get a lot of blowouts with that guy. Then we got little Snapcaster Mage. This guy's popular in Standard and Legacy and whatnot, but rightfully so. He's a very good card. He's in here. He's going to get back a counterspell almost all the time, and that's good enough for me. Then we have Kai, Void Mage Prodigy, and he's a little pricey with the super blue commitment, but very solid card in this deck. Got a lot of little 1/1s and 2/1s and 2/2 creatures in here. So after you get in their abilities like a Willbender flipping over or Snapcaster Mage flashes something back, you got no problem paying 2 blue and just crushing them to counter a spell. So he's all around good guy. We got Jace's Archivist. Pay a blue and tap it to Windfall. Sometimes you just run out of cards in your hand. Sometimes you draw a lot of lands and you just need to get into some gas, so he helps you out. Here we have a Merfolk Wizard, Sigil Tracer. You pay 1 blue and 1 colorless. Tap 2 untapped wizards, 2 copy an instant or sorcery spell. So like a Reverberate that you saw earlier. This is a new test card. Haven't got much play yet, but hopefully it's going to work out well. Then we have Baron Master Wizard. This is an old guy before creatures actually had like types and whatnot. Like, he is Summon Legend, and as you can see in his text box, Baron Master Wizard counts as a wizard, so that's always good. You can pay 2 colorless mana and sacrifice a permanent to bounce a creature to its owner's hand. You know, sometimes you're going to use this defensively. A lot of times you're going to use it when your opponents try to steal your guys or kill your guys. You can pay 2 and sack that guy, so you're not just losing it for no reason, to bounce something, whether it be a big fatty of your opponents or one of your own guys to save. Sometimes someone might pay a board sweeper, and you'll be able to sack half your team to bounce the other half of your team back to your hand, so you're not losing that much. So with this guy, you know, you don't have to be too afraid to overcommit. Then we have the Patron Wizard, 2/2 for 3 blue mana. You can tap any untapped wizard you control and counter target spell unless the controller pays 1. So it turns all your wizards into tap for spike, which is pretty good. It'll be a little annoying to your opponents. They'll have to do a lot more thinking, and with that, hopefully they'll be making a few more mistakes. Then we have Rain, Academy Chancellor. She's a very solid 1/1 for 3. Whenever you or a permanent you control is a target spell or ability controlled by your opponent, you may draw a card. And then she has more text, but she's never going to be enchanted, so that's irrelevant. But you'll notice with this deck, if you put it together, that your opponents are going to be wanting to kill your guys all the time and kill your permanents all the time. So you might as well get some return for your cards. You get to draw. Maybe you'll draw into something that can save them. So she's very good at protecting you. Now we move on to a steady stream of 4-drops we're going to have here, and you'll notice a theme. Most of them are 2/2s for 4. First off is a very good one, Sower of Temptation, Flying Fairy. Whenever it comes into play, you steal an opponent's creature as long as you have it. So this is going to be good in the late game when your opponent's casting 6+ drops and you're stealing Titans and you're stealing Eldrazi's and all kinds of guys you can get some benefits out of and not die to. You see Kaho, Minimo Historian, another 2/2 for 4. When she comes into play, you can search your deck for 3 instant cards removed from the game, and you can pay X, where X is the cost of the card, and tap her and play that card for free. So she's going to come into play. You're going to tutor up a couple of counter spells and, you know, maybe reverberate type effect and whatnot, whatever you think you need at the time, and then you get to cast it for free. This is one of the creatures, along with the other guys, that have tap abilities where you're going to want Lightning Greaves or Swiftfoot Boots, so you can use them right away and not, you know, get blown out by them just killing her before you can use it. You're not always going to want to get 3 instant cards. You know, if you think they're going to easily kill it, you might just get 1 or 2, so you don't just have those cards exiled forever. But she is pretty solid at tutoring up counter spells. Another 2/2 for 4, we have Void Mage Husher. She has Flash. When she comes into play, you counter an activated ability. And when you play a spell, you can bounce her back to your hand. And a lot of players don't really see this coming because they're going to see your deck, they're going to see just a lot of counter spells. Counter spell, counter spell, counter spell. And they're not going to really see coming that you can counter an activated ability. So people are going to try to use Planeswalker abilities, things like Oblivion Stones, Pernicious Deeds, things like that where they got to sack them, and then you're going to flash this guy in, they're going to get no value out of it. So he's pretty awesome, and it's a lot of value because you can keep reusing her every time you play a spell. Another 2/2 for 4. We got Glenelendra Archmage, Fairy Wizard, Flying, Persist. You can pay a blue and sack her to negate counter target non-creature spell. So, you know, a lot of times she's going to get 2 spells, or she's going to sit on the board and just prevent your opponent from playing their huge non-creature spells because they don't want to just get so much value by playing 1 blue mana and countering it. And then sometimes worst comes to worst, she just has to chump block and comes right back. So another solid creature. This guy's a new addition to the deck, Lunar Mystic, another 2/2 for 4. Whenever you cast an instant spell, you may pay 1, and if you do, draw a card. And as you saw earlier, a lot of instants in the deck. So paying 1, not that big of a price to draw a card. So hopefully this guy's going to work out. Then we have Venser, another 2/2 for 4. He's a legendary creature, human wizard. He's got Flash. When he comes into play, you bounce a spell or a permanent to its owner's hand. So he can come in and he's sort of like a remand, or he can come in and just boomerang something. Really versatile guy. Another 2/2 for 4. We got Fallow Sage, Merfolk Wizard. Whenever it becomes tapped, you can draw a card. You know, a lot of times in the game, there will be a player open, especially if you're in a big multiplayer game. So, you swing at them. 2's not a lot for them to take for you to draw a card. And then we got his friend, Surge Spanner. Same kind of ability. Whenever he becomes tapped, you can pay a 1 blue and 1 colorless, and you get boomerang something. Bounce any permanent to its owner's hand. This is very helpful, you know, whether it be saving your own things, or bouncing your opponent's things, or bouncing things that your opponent stole from you. So, he's an all-around pretty solid guy. Another 2/2 for 4, as you see the theme. And then we get into someone who works well with these last two guys, Azami, Lady of Scrolls. She's a 5-mana 0/2. You can tap and untap wizard you control to draw a card. So either of those guys, you don't even have to attack with them. You can just tap them and get their abilities. And every other, you know, little 1/1, 1/2, 2/2 creature in the deck, tap those guys and just fill up your hand, draw your deck. There's not really any shenanigans with her. She's just a super solid creature and a wizard build. And, you know, you can't just deny her a spot in the deck because she's so powerful. Then we move on to Beguiler of Wills. On the flip side, this wizard's not that powerful. I'm trying her out, but you know, she hasn't been doing great so far, so we'll see what happens with her. She is a 1/1 for 5, which is very easy to kill. You can tap her and gain control of target creature with power less than or equal to the number of creatures you control. You know, you're not a token deck, you're not going to have a swarm on the board. You know, you might be lucky to have 3 or 4 guys. So you can get some good value and steal some good utility creatures. You're not going to be stealing any of the giant fatties. But she's not too bad. Then we have Magus of the Future. And this guy is very good. He lets you play with the top card of your deck revealed. And you can play the top card of your deck. So just like Future Sight the enchantment, this guy basically is going to let you cycle through your deck a lot faster. And you normally letting your opponent see the top card of your deck, not the best thing because they know what's coming. But with this guy, you know, they're going to see Counterspell a lot of the time. So they may be worrisome, you know, they may be like, oh, he's out of Counterspells finally. But when they see it sitting there, they're going to think twice about, you know, tapping out for their 7, 8, 10 mana cost spells. So they might just skip their turn, letting your opponent fall into your counters. And then when everyone starts playing like that, you're just time walking the table. And then, of course, you're going to win. Next up we have Teferi, and Teferi, he's a pretty douchey guy because he pretty much shuts down what your opponents can normally do, and anytime you're playing cards that just don't let your opponents play normal games of Magic, they're not going to like it. So he has Flash himself. He lets you play your other creatures as if they had Flash, and your opponent can only play spells when they can play a sorcery. So that's the big kicker. They're not going to like that. They're going to try to kill this guy at all costs, so don't be surprised. But it's just way too good of a card not to include. Like the Leyline of Anticipation, you want to cast your stuff at instant speed, so you can always leave open counter spells. Then we move on to Izzet Chronarch. He's a 2/2 for 5. Comes into play, returns an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. Not much to say there. Solid guy, gets you back a card. Then we have Arcanus the Omnipotent. Legendary creature wizard. Nothing else. No other creature type. He's a 3/4. Yeah, he taps, draws 3 cards, and he can pay 2 and 2 blue, and bounce them back to your hand. So he has kind of a protection for himself to save himself from wraths, spot removal, and steal effects. This guy, you know, people are going to see him. He says draw 3 cards. They're not going to want you to have him around, so don't expect him to last very long. If he does, you're probably winning. Then we have Maloku the Clouded Mirror. I threw this guy in. You know, Maloku was a good solid creature for a long time, and I said, why not? I'll give this guy a shot. And you know, I didn't really think it, but this guy's outshining and exceeding expectations every time I play him. A lot of games I'm winning with this guy, a lot of late games, and this deck will go late game. A lot of times this guy will protect you and keep you alive. Paying 1 and bouncing the land you just paid with to make a 1/1 chump blocker is going to save your life way too much in this game. And then in the late game, paying 1 and bouncing multiple lands to your hand, creating a squad of flyers, even if they are just 1/1s, you know, you get 10, 15 of them, you can just wipe out a player when it gets down to 1-on-1, because you're not really worried about having your lands in play when it's down to 1-on-1 and you could just kill your opponent. So this guy's been working out very well. So much that I threw in this other creature, Patron of the Moon. This is not a creature you're normally going to see in an EDH deck. He's a big expensive guy. It's kind of goofy and doesn't do much. But his ability of pay 1 and put 2 land cards from your hand into play tapped works pretty well with Moloku. Also works pretty well when you're drawing like an extra 5+ cards a turn. You can ramp up pretty good with him, and that's going to help you out in the long run. So hoping that this guy works out well. Then we have Mnemonic Wall. Just like Izzet Chronarch, comes into play, returns an instant or sorcery to your hand in the graveyard. We have Draining Well. 6 mana, 1/1 with flash, comes into play, counters a spell, and he gets +1/+1 counters for however big the spell was. It's just big flyer and counter spell. And we got Guile. 6 mana, 6/6. He can only be blocked by 3 or more creatures, which is very relevant in the late game. Whenever he goes to the graveyard, you shuffle him back in your deck, so that helps you not deck out in a lot of cases. And then his main ability, which is the whole reason he's in the deck, is whenever you counter a spell with an ability or a spell from your hand, you can remove that spell from the game, and you can play it without paying its mana cost. So it pretty much turns all of your counter spells into spelljacks, and that's pretty awesome, getting to play all your opponent's spells for free. And like I said, this is just a big 6/6 guy. It's hard to block late game, so this is one of the creatures you're going to be winning with a lot. And another late game finisher, Sturmgeist. Flying, 5 mana. Power and toughness equal to the number of cards in your hands. So this guy, as you can figure, is going to be huge. It's going to be at least a 7/7, if not bigger, up to like 15, 20 sometimes. And whenever he hits a player, he draws a card. So this is a win condition, along with his friend Psychosis Crawler. Very similar. Power and toughness equal to the cards in your hand. This guy on the flip side, is whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses a life. So when you play this guy and then you just draw 10 cards in a turn, next thing you know, your opponent's taking 30 damage, and this guy's huge. So pretty awesome win condition. Then we have Kira, Great Glass Spinner, 2/2 flyer. She gives all your guys protection. Whenever all your creatures have, whenever this creature becomes a target or a spell or ability for the first time in a turn, you counter it. So, as most people know, 1-for-1 spot removal, not the greatest in EDH, so people are really not going to want to waste it when it's just going to get countered. So this guy does a really good job protecting your team. And especially when you have Rain out, they got to use a spell just to get countered, and you get to draw a card, and then they got to use another spell to do something, and you get to draw another card. Those guys together, just excellent value. Then we have Charmbreaker Devils. He is a 4/4 for 6 mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, you return an instant or sorcery at random from your graveyard to your hand. Most times this guy's going to be bringing you back a counterspell. Bring you back a counterspell, bring you back a counterspell, and your opponent's just going to get buried into a hole if they don't deal with this guy. And his other ability is, whenever you play an instant or sorcery, he gets +4/+0 to the end of turn. And, that's not entirely irrelevant. Sometimes late games you can cast a couple of things and just kill people with a big fat guy. Then we have Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker. Everyone knows what this guy does. I do not have any cheap infinite combos. I don't play things like that in my decks. I don't play Pestermite, Seaver, Exarch, anything like that. He's just in there to get a lot of value out of some guys. Having 2 Guiles bashing in, or having 2 of most of the non-legendary creatures, just going to be good value all the time. And with this guy being triple red, as you can see in the land section, played a little more red than I probably need just to make sure I can cast this guy, because he's just so good. And then last but not least, we have the Big Daddy Consecrated Sphinx. People know what this guy does. Whenever an opponent draws a card, you draw 2. And, most people hate this guy. I don't think he's fair, even by a long run, but if you're playing blue, it's hard to not play him, because he's just so good. You're going to draw so many cards off him, and when you draw that many cards, you're probably just going to win. So, that was my deck. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you see anything that I maybe should add or change in the deck, please go ahead and leave a comment in the comment section. If you liked the video, please like and favorite it. And if you want to see more, please subscribe. And until next time.